Hey, everybody. It is Wednesday, March 19th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, it was great to see you in person today as you made your visit to our new headquarters, Mo News headquarters, at Industrious, at the Industrious offices in New York City.
Moshe, I love the office. I love the coffee. I love the snacks. It was great to see everybody in person and a lot of fun. We took some promotional photographs and it was a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, we did a promo shoot, as they say in the business. So look out for those photos on Instagram and our website coming up soon. And Jill, we're putting the finishing touches on the podcast studio, though ironically, despite the fact that you came all the way into the city, we're recording this remotely because the studio, we're almost there, but we're missing a few things like video cameras. Like we're waiting for those to come in this week.
Something I learned while on the train en route to the city. You're like, by the way, podcast studio is not done.
The studio is not done yet, but we're getting
would have been helpful perhaps when we were planning this, but Jill, it actually worked out. It was great.
I'm just trying to get you to come visit once in a while, and so I have to come up with schemes.
Well, I'm glad I did. It was a lot of fun and great to see the team in person. And now let's get to the headlines. They're home. The U.S. astronauts stranded in space for 9 months have finally arrived back on Earth. More from their journey. Then Russian President Vladimir Putin agrees to a partial ceasefire in Ukraine after a nearly 2-hour-long phone call with President Trump. Meanwhile, Israel has resumed airstrikes in Gaza after the ceasefire collapses. Hundreds are reported dead in the Gaza Strip.
And the Israelis say that they've gotten several senior Hamas leaders.
Back in the United States, the Supreme Court's Chief Justice John Roberts responds to President Trump's call to impeach a judge over a disagreement on immigration. Spoiler alert, Roberts isn't into it.
No, a rare rebuke from the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to the President of the United States.
The Trump administration releases new records on JFK's assassination. What, if anything, we're learning? In tech news, Amazon is removing an Echo privacy setting that keeps Alexa recordings from being sent to the company, and some people aren't happy about it. And a Chinese EV company says it has new technology that charges its vehicles as fast as going to the gas pump.
This is a big deal if this works.
And what happens if there is someone you don't like at work? Like seriously, you don't like them and think they could potentially be dangerous, but your office is in Antarctica.
It's a problem. We'll tell you about it.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, it was a 2-word fax that read, "I'm back." Some of you may know who this involves.
All right, NASA astronauts Sonny and Butch are home. Their 9-month space adventure finally came to an end Tuesday evening after splashing down off the coast of Florida around 6 p.m. They returned to Earth in a SpaceX Dragon capsule along with fellow NASA astronaut Nick Hague and a Russian cosmonaut. It took the SpaceX capsule 17 hours to get back to Earth after undocking from the space station. As we've been reporting, astronauts Sonny Williams and Butch Wilmore were unable to return to Earth as originally planned on the Boeing Starliner after that spacecraft experienced problems on its test flight to the International Space Station. And those problems turned their week-long trip into months.
Yes, 9 months. Here, they ended up celebrating July 4th, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, aboard the space station. What NASA basically decided was, once they realized that the Boeing Starliner that they came with they didn't feel was up to snuff, safe enough to bring them back home. By the way, they ended up bringing back the Boeing Starliner that had a whole bunch of issues that brought them up. They brought it back without any astronauts, just out of precaution. And so NASA decided, you know what? You guys stay up here. We'll include you as part of the regular rotation and bring you back in 2025. And so that's what they did. It didn't make sense safety-wise, logistically-wise, to bring them back. But they pushed back on the term, Jill, that they were stuck in space. Technically, they could have come back in an emergency mission back, but NASA decided, you know what? At this point, we're going to just keep you up here. So it will be interesting, among other things, to look at the impact of space on them. Being in space for a very long time can have impacts on the body. You might have seen their return yesterday. A number of you watched it live with us on YouTube. We put out the link on Instagram. And upon splashdown in the ocean yesterday, you saw them getting pulled out, being wheeled out in wheelchairs out of precaution here. Extended time in microgravity can cause muscles to atrophy. Longer missions can change bone density, can even cause vision changes. And so typically you're doing a couple hours of training in space every day to combat this, but they want to put you through a whole regimen of tests when you return to Earth. So, interestingly, they've been saying that they had an amazing time in space. Again, what was supposed to be just a few days turned into several months up there. They got to be involved in a lot of interesting science and experiments that take place on that space station. At the same time, they did say that it did take a toll on their families back here on Earth, who were expecting to see them at the end of an 8-day trip in June, and instead didn't see them until the following March. Now, as for that Boeing Starliner that took them up, had a whole bunch of issues, and was brought back to Earth without astronauts. Well, Boeing has a whole contract with NASA. They're supposed to bring up more astronauts in addition to SpaceX. SpaceX, Elon Musk company, they've had a much easier time going back and forth than Boeing Starliner, which has been delayed over budget, finally brought up the astronauts, had problems, came back by itself. But Boeing has a whole deal to bring several more missions up to the International Space Station. And it's unclear whether they're going to get it up to snuff again. It has to be recertified now to be safe enough to bring humans back up to the space station and back again. The issue they face is that the space station is actually set to be finished in 2030. Like, it's been up there for a long time, and they're going to end operations deorbit in 2030 because at that point, NASA and space agencies around the world are ready to move on to the pivot back to the moon, creating a moon base. This whole space station experiment has been great. We did a bunch of great science up there, but that's set to be done there. And Boeing has this whole deal with NASA, but unclear when Boeing is going to be able to send astronauts back up there again, and the clock is running out on that contract. Jill, one more thing, and we posted this video on Instagram. Super cool. The splashdown of the astronauts yesterday, dolphins came to greet them. So dolphins in the ocean there basically started swimming, and there's a cool video of the dolphins swimming around the space probe in the ocean. The dolphins curious as to wait, what just crashed into the ocean?
I think the dolphins knew that they needed a little TLC.
Dolphins are like, listen, we're here for you, but by the way, this is our backyard. What are you doing here?
Okay, over to two major international stories we're watching. Some progress was made yesterday in President Trump's pursuit to end the war in Ukraine. He spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin for over 2 hours on the phone. The call was about the U.S. proposed 30-day ceasefire deal. Last week, Ukrainian officials agreed to the deal, but Russia said that it wouldn't agree without certain conditions being met. Now, it does not appear that the Russians are there yet, even after the phone call, but Trump and Putin did appear to make some progress on what they are calling an energy and infrastructure ceasefire, at least to start. The Kremlin said that Putin accepted a proposal for both sides to stop targeting each other's energy infrastructure for the next 30 days, and he followed up by relaying those orders to the Russian military. The White House readout said that peace will begin with this infrastructure deal. Russia has yet to fully commit to the broader ceasefire deal, and more negotiations are expected on that.
So there is some progress here, especially if you're Ukrainian who's dealt with massive power outages over these past few years, tens of billions of dollars in destruction that Putin has wreaked on Ukraine. Ukraine has tried to respond to the extent possible, but ultimately here, the damage done to Ukraine's infrastructure is going to take decades. The estimates are, Jill, more than $500 billion to rebuild. So small steps here. That's what you got to do with conflict resolution, that even though Putin is not ready for a full ceasefire, the fact that he's willing to start with hey, I'm not going to blow up your power plants, not going to blow up your bridges, is a way for the two sides to start to build trust in one another, which is a key thing you got to do as these negotiations continue. So this appears to have been the sort of takeaway from the Trump phone call with Putin yesterday. Putin clearly not moving very fast here, still has some concerns from his perspective. Remember Vladimir Putin, he invaded Ukraine. He thinks Ukraine shouldn't exist. He thinks it should be part of Russia. And so among his demands, Ukraine can't rearm. Ukraine can't work on its defenses. Ukraine can't bring in international peacekeepers. Ukraine cannot bring in new weapons from the U.S. or the West. And it comes as Russia occupies 20% of Ukraine, is been making some progress against Ukraine in recent months. And so Zelensky has said, listen, after the whole White House meeting, the Ukrainians said to the U.S., you know what, we're willing to take a ceasefire here, but we need some security guarantees. And so Zelensky has been saying, Putin, you're the one pushing off the deal here. if you really want peace. And you have seen it to a certain extent from Trump's statements saying, hey, Russia, it's time for you to make some progress here, to take some steps towards peace. So we shall see what happens there. But a small step there. Let's see if they can keep it and then move to the much more complicated situation, given the Russian demands and given the Ukrainian demands here of actually getting this war to an end, which is now more than 3 years and 1 month in. This month began in 2022 with that Russian invasion. Jill, beyond the situation in Ukraine and Russia, another topic that came up there for Trump and Putin was the Middle East. They apparently came to some agreements there. Apparently, the negotiations will take place. Several have already taken place in Saudi Arabia, and there is talk about the Russian relationship with Iran. They've gotten much closer with Iran in recent years. They've been supporting Hamas in recent years, and so, in particular, it appears the U.S. is trying to get the Russians to stop buying Iranian weapons and stop supporting the Iranians. Russia historically has helped Iran access weapons. They've bought weapons from them. And by the way, those Iranian weapons often funnel to groups like Hamas.
Moshe, speaking of Hamas, the war appears to be back on in the Middle East after extensive Israeli airstrikes in the last 24 hours. We told you that the ceasefire collapsed in the last couple of weeks. There have been multiple efforts to extend it. Israel and the U.S. say that Hamas rejected several American and Israeli proposals. So in response, Israel has launched extensive airstrikes on the Gaza Strip. It marks the heaviest fighting since January. Israel says that it killed numerous mid-level and senior-ranking Hamas terrorists in the strikes. The Hamas-run health authority says that more than 400 people have died and hundreds more injured, including women and children. The group does not distinguish between militant and civilian deaths. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu cited Hamas's refusal to release hostages as the reason for the attacks. Hamas, for its part, says Israel has broken the ceasefire agreement. Israeli officials say the strikes will continue with increasing force until Hamas agrees to the terms of a second phase of the ceasefire. There are still 59 Israeli hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. Now 530 days into the war, less than half are believed to still be alive. And there is some concern about their fate amid the recent airstrikes. Families of the hostages have released a statement saying that the government has chosen to give up on them. The initial ceasefire, which was mediated by Qatar, Egypt, and the United States, started on January 19th. Hamas released nearly 40 hostages, both alive and dead. Israel released about 1,800 Palestinian prisoners. Negotiations for this next phase were always going to be much more difficult because it involves the release of the final hostages and also a plan for the end of the war entirely. Israel has not been willing to agree to end the war without fully getting rid of Hamas. The two sides have not been able to get anywhere on the second phase of the deal.
Yeah, so we were in that sort of purgatory between deals there for the last couple of weeks until the Israelis began to launch their strikes there in the last 24 hours. The White House has confirmed that they were consulted by the Israelis in the last 36 hours about those strikes. They're fully supportive of Israel's actions, saying, like, listen, we offered something to Hamas here. They rejected it. We should note the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian government in the West Bank, that is a rival of Hamas, put out a statement that sort of condemned both parties, saying the Israelis are out of line with these attacks, but they also called Hamas irresponsible in the way that it's been conducting negotiations recently, and it basically allowing for another round of strikes to kill more innocent Palestinians, especially at a time where Ramadan, the annual Muslim holiday, is about to get started here. And there was thought that effectively this column would stay through the holidays. Ramadan on the Muslim side, Passover is coming up for Jews around the world, including in Israel. And there's just a lot of accusations going around here. Hamas has accused the Israelis of ending the ceasefire agreement. The Israelis have accused Hamas of not being willing to continue hostage exchanges, making unreasonable demands, and of course, demanding that they get to continue to govern the Gaza Strip. So we're going to see here how difficult it is to get to another ceasefire situation here. Remember, Trump prided himself on it as he headed into the inauguration. There, both the Biden teams and Trump teams had worked together on landing that first ceasefire deal, that 6-week deal that lasted slightly longer. So we'll see how they can get the two sides together again. A reminder, the Americans recently have been talking directly to Hamas. So we'll see if that pays any dividends.
Time for the speed read from the Hill newspaper. New developments on President Trump's showdown with the courts over his administration's immigration policy. On Tuesday, the president taking things to a new level, calling for Congress to impeach the judge that's hearing the case on the Alien Enemies Act and the deportation of hundreds of detained migrants to El Salvador over the weekend. Trump called U.S. District Judge James Boasberg a, quote, radical left lunatic in a post on Truth Social. The president is frustrated with Boasberg for pausing his attempts to use the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to deport suspected Venezuelan gang members without having to go through immigration courts. Over the weekend, Trump announced that he was using that act to deport nearly 300 detained migrants, the first time it's been used since World War II. Hours later, the judge, who was first appointed by George W. Bush and then was an Obama judicial appointee, he put a temporary restraining order on the move until he could determine if it was constitutional for Trump to invoke the act. On Monday, the Trump Department of Justice had a tense exchange with the judge on whether the Trump administration followed the judge's orders, namely if the deportation flights left before or after the judge ordered that they be halted.
Yeah, Jill, we should mention a couple of you who listen to the podcast wrote in saying, hey, wasn't he also appointed to the bench by George W. Bush? That's why we like to make a point there of noting that Boasberg actually was a Bush appointee to a lower court, and then later Obama also appointed him to the bench. So sort of one of those rare situations where you have a federal court judge appointed to various slots by both Republican and Democratic presidents. So with all that in mind, the big headline for many of us Tuesday afternoon was that U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts decided to chime in here. So you had, as you just laid out there, President Trump call for the impeachment of a federal judge that he disagrees with, right? It's going through the process, and he's like, impeach this guy, Congress. Well, John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, decided to put out a statement, middle of the day, very rare statement, that said, effectively, Mr. President, we don't impeach judges here that we disagree with. Now, the quote from the statement was less direct than that, but that's sort of what you got. This is what Roberts wrote. For more than 2 centuries, it's been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. Now, Roberts did not address that to President Trump. Roberts did not direct that to President Trump. But who else was he really talking about when he just puts out a statement saying, hey, impeachment is not an appropriate response? It only came a few hours after Trump himself was talking about impeachment of a federal judge. Now, this is very rare. And we should note that Roberts is a conservative appointee, right, from George W. Bush. And many of you noticed at the presidential joint session address to Congress that Trump and Roberts had a moment there where you could overhear Trump on camera saying thank you for something. We didn't know quite what. Now, we should note that Trump has praised Roberts in the past. Last summer, Roberts wrote that Supreme Court opinion that granted presidents, all presidents, including President Trump, of course, broad immunity for actions taken during the presidency. Now, that was a key ruling when it came to the case that Trump was facing at the time regarding January 6th and election interference. So Roberts here wrote that opinion last year that Trump very much liked. Now, we're just about 8 months later, and Roberts has taken a moment to put out a statement effectively criticizing the president for going after a fellow federal court judge. So we will see what Trump has to say to this, whether there's people around Trump being like, yo, you cannot be going back and forth with the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, or if you guys wake up at some point early morning when Trump tends to post these things and he said something about John Roberts. But quite a stake in the ground there by Roberts saying, stop it, especially given the concerns about safety for these judges. And the fact that, you know, there's like 1,000+ federal judges out there. And if people feel that it's okay to start threatening them, calling for their impeachment, Roberts and other federal judges don't like the road that takes us down.
From the New York Times, more than 80,000 pages related to the 1963 assassination of President John F. Kennedy were released Tuesday evening. Some are still heavily redacted, even though President Trump said on Monday that he told officials, quote, no redactions. Others are completely illegible or very difficult to read because they haven't been properly preserved or were badly photocopied. Experts really weren't expecting that there were going to be too many revelations from this new trove of documents. Millions of JFK documents have already been made public, but President Trump ordered the release of thousands of still classified files earlier this year with an executive order. In the early 1990s, the federal government mandated that all assassination-related documents be housed in a single collection in the National Archives. The collection of over 5 million records was required to be opened by 2017, barring any exemptions designated by the president. Nearly all were released. During his first term, Trump said that he would allow the release of all of the remaining records, but he did end up holding some of them back because of what he called the potential harm to national security. President Biden also withheld a few thousand documents at the behest of the FBI and CIA during his time in office.
So there's no shortage of theories on what happened to JFK. Of course, the official story is that Lee Harvey Oswald acted by himself in assassinating the president on November 22nd, 1963. And then that was the story for years. But then there was that movie in the early 90s, JFK. And out of that hatched a whole bunch of theories. And that led to Congress passing a law in the 90s that said, to clear things up, you guys have 25 years. And then everything by 2017, this is back in 92, by 2017, you got to release everything. And so that was Trump's first term. And the CIA and FBI still say to Trump, hey, don't release everything. And so 99% of the documents were released, except for about 1% of the documents. Then Biden has another chance to, follow through on this law. And the CIA says to him, yeah, you can't release everything. And so now Trump has said in recent months, I'm finally going to release everything. And that is what he promised he would do last night. Though, as you noted, Jill, some of the documents still illegible. Now, is there anything real here? Is there anything new here? Is it going to break major ground? Most people who say this stuff say no. That ultimately here, some of this stuff is withheld because just the government likes to overclassify things. And maybe there's some embarrassing details about the CIA from that era when it comes to the fact that they might have actually known more about Lee Harvey Oswald, but not that they actually planned the assassination of JFK. Now, historians are tweeting about this as we speak here, as we record this late on Tuesday, Jill. Apparently, of these documents, there's more than 1,100 separate PDFs. Many of them lack any annotation, any agency of origin, as in where they come from, dates, file numbers. Basically, this could take weeks or months to sort through to figure out what's actually new here and how much of this has actually already been released. One historian calling this dump is profoundly more impenetrable than all the previous more annotated ones. There's random stuff from Cuba from the late 60s. There's a lot of stuff in here. It was not organized in advance, sort of done, just sort of, I'm going to do it. And, Trump declared it in January. Trump noted on Monday to the media, you've got a lot of reading to do. So as of this recording Tuesday night, it does not appear there's anything new or groundbreaking. So beware of social media posts being like, the new documents say X, the new documents say Y. They probably don't say that at this point. There's no way anyone can read through 80,000 documents, even with AI and all these PDFs. So we will bring you, if there's any compelling information, we will tell you about them. We've had Jefferson Morley on before. Jefferson is a former Washington Post reporter who runs a newsletter called JFK Facts Blog. He's a historian on these things, and he's going through these documents as well. So I've been DMing with him, waiting for him to tell me whether there's anything new here. And again, 99% of the documents related to the assassination are already out there. This is most of the last 1%. And by the way, Trump has also promised that the rest of anything that's classified on RFK's assassination from 68 and MLK's assassination from 68 will also be released here in the coming months.
Some tech news now from USA Today. Amazon told its users that it's planning to remove a privacy setting on its Echo devices later this month that will allow basically all voice requests to be sent to its cloud. With the change, Amazon Echo users will lose the option to store and process their Alexa requests locally, which again means that all of their voice recordings will be sent to Amazon's cloud. And this is raising some concerns about privacy. Instead of the feature, do not send voice recordings, there's going to be a different setting called don't save recordings.
Yeah, so ultimately here, Jill, an important stat that we should keep in mind, 99.7% of us don't use this feature. 0.03% of people actually took time to do not send voice recordings to Amazon Now, of course, everything gets sent to Amazon, but you can go to Don't Save Recordings. Now, the downside of Don't Save Recordings is you can't distinguish between people in the household. So, one of the nice things about having Alexa is like they know your voice, they know your partner's voice, they know your kid's voice. Well, with Don't Save Recordings, you can't really get to know anybody in there. So Amazon's sort of pressuring you for ease of use, for better use, to make these recordings available to everybody. And this is just a reminder that when you have these devices in your house, there's always a chance they could be listening. They're using that data to make their AI smarter. You don't know how that stuff ends up getting used. Now, they make various promises related to privacy here. But one thing that privacy experts suggest is maybe unplugging your Alexas or Amazon devices or any of the listening devices from any company when you're not using them. Also moving them out of more intimate areas of the household. So keep them out of bedrooms or bathrooms if you really want to ensure your privacy there and you're worried about that sort of thing. We should note that we talked about this actually on the podcast back in 2023. Amazon agreed to pay $25 million in civil penalties after it came out that the company stored recordings of children's interactions with Alexa forever. So, all these devices, very helpful in some cases, but a lot of people have privacy concerns over them.
For some reason, all of my Alexa devices, no matter who's talking to it, say, "Hi, Bonnie." And that's my mother-in-law. And we're just like, what? We don't even understand.
Is she logged in?
We don't know. And I guess we just think it's sort of funny, and it's obviously not that inconvenient. So we've just never changed it. But it's like every morning without fail, "Good morning, Bonnie. Here's the weather. Good morning, Bonnie." From CNBC, China's electric vehicle company BYD announced some new technology that would allow its vehicles to charge almost as quickly as it takes to put gas in a car. After the announcement, BYD's stock rallied to jump more than 6% Tuesday to a new 52-week high. It is up 50% year to date. Meanwhile, EV competitor Tesla has seen its stock falling for 8 consecutive weeks amid a broader tech sell-off. This new tech by the Chinese company is called Super E-Platform. The company says it's capable of peak charging speeds of 1,000 kilowatts, allowing for roughly 250 miles of range after just 5 minutes of charging, although CNBC could not independently verify those claims. Now compare that to Tesla, where the superchargers offer a charging rate of up to 500 kilowatts, so half of what BYD is saying, allowing for about 170 miles with 15 minutes of charging. But Moshe, this is huge news because one of the major things that is holding people back from switching to electric vehicles is what's called range anxiety, or people worried that their car is going to run out of battery before their destination. And Moshe, it also solves for the problem of taking 40 minutes to fully charge your electric vehicle. I remember you rented an electric vehicle on one of your trips, and that was one of the downfalls that you saw.
And by the way, Jill, that wasn't from 0 to 100. I was at like 28% or 30%. But that was range anxiety, right? Like viewing your car like you view your iPhone. You're like, it's one thing to look at your iPhone at 30%, 20%, and you're like, even if it goes to 0, like I can, deal with it. I'll go find a charger somewhere. Your car is another story. Now, for the most part, most people, who have EVs, they'll have a charger in their garage or a convenient charger, but it makes it more difficult for people who live in cities or people who, want to rent an EV who don't have, a place to park it in their garage. And those, by the way, are the superchargers that move at, the Tesla at 15 minutes, as you mentioned, for 170 miles. The chargers I was looking at were not superchargers. These were like slow boat chargers. So like it would have been several hours to go from 0 to 100% there on those. So this is a big deal here. If this is real from BYD, if they figured this out, but this was sort of inevitable, innovation wise, that they would eventually get their act together when it comes to fast charging. Now, the big thing will be deploying those fast chargers in public settings, in parking lots, in various places. And one thing that the Trump administration has actually removed funding for, as they've been making these cuts, is the major multi-billion-dollar program that the Biden administration had put in place to fund and subsidize putting superchargers across the country in order to incentivize people to get EVs. Trump has said, no, this is a waste of money. And so ultimately they've cut back on funding there. So we'll see what happens, though, with this Chinese technology, whether A, it's real, and B, whether it gets over here.
And finally, from the New York Times, trouble in one of the most remote places on Earth. A group of South African scientists has pleaded for help, saying they are trapped in an isolated base on a cliff edge in Antarctica with a team member who has become violent. One member of the team has been accused of assault and threatening violence against his colleagues. However, South Africa now says, after an investigation, that it will not be removing scientists from that remote base.
Yeah, so imagine you had somebody at work who like totally sucks and who's like potentially violent against you. Now imagine your work is in a remote station with a handful of people in Antarctica. That's the situation they face right now at this station as they head into the winter months in South Africa. We should note that the worst months of the winter there are July and August. So they're heading into basically the zone now of 8 to 9 months in certain parts of Antarctica where it is treacherous, nearly impossible to move anywhere. So these accusations against this researcher in Antarctica were first reported to the South African government last month. Since then, South African authorities have been investigating the claims, and they say that they believe that an individual can be left at the base, that they don't believe he'll cause trouble. This is the Sane 4 Antarctic base. They're set to be cut off from the world here for the next few months. And Jill, we should note, it was interesting researching this whole thing. Because though Antarctica has like no permanent residents, like no people there have been a number of cases of crime and misconduct on Antarctica in recent years. There's a professor at Stanford named Jane Willenbrig who said that a geologist harassed her while she was a student on an expedition there back in 99 and 2000. She later filed a complaint about that. In 2018, a researcher at a Russian station in Antarctica stabbed a colleague, an apparent emotional breakdown there. South Africa's teams have had issues there before. In 2017, a researcher on a base between the mainland and Antarctica took an axe to another's laptop because of some bizarre love triangle that was taking place in Antarctica. Jill, I think there needs to be like a Netflix series, like the next or not Netflix, what's the series on Max that we're all watching right now that takes place in a hotel? White Lotus?
White Lotus, yeah.
White Lotus Antarctica needs to come next season.
It's like what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it that it's such kind of like a crazy assignment that those are the types of people that apply for it? Or do you just kind of lose your mind being in Antarctica and not really having a lot of sunlight and not being able to go outside and being kind of trapped and confined into a place? I don't know.
It's a very good question. They seem to have more problems there than they do at the space station with love triangles and taking an axe to someone's laptop. Jesus. But I'm sure there are lessons there that NASA and company are learning as we get set to send astronauts to, live on a permanent mission on the moon and Mars in the coming years.
I think for anyone listening, one of the takeaways is just whatever work issues you're having, they probably aren't that bad.
You can still go home at the end of the day. You're not stuck at a remote base in negative 100 weather an hour to go. All right. Now for On This Day in History on March 19th, 94 years ago today, Nevada legalized gambling, paving the way for casinos in a very small town, not very well known back then, but now very well known to us, named Las Vegas. On this day in 1995, big day in Chicago, big day for America, big day for the NBA, big day for the world. He put out a fax, had 2 words: I'm back. Michael Jordan returns to professional basketball on this day in a game against Indiana after a 21-month hiatus. Jordan, of course, had retired for the first time, the first of 3 times. After 3 championships, he'd gone to go play baseball. His father had been murdered. He decides to come back and play for the Bulls and win 3 more championships for my hometown Chicago Bulls. He would then retire again and then come back again to play for the Washington Wizards and then retire again. And then he would go on to become an owner. Anyway, notable and Jill, remarkable in 1995, the way that you had to, alert the world to something. You had to fax individually each media outlet the same fax over and over again.
What's the sound that faxes make? It's like
That's a good impression. Yes. I'm going to go with that.
Sorry if I made anyone uncomfortable. I feel like I just made myself a little uncomfortable doing that.
A bit of music history on this day. With a $1,000 cash deposit, Elvis Presley agrees to buy a house. It would be called Graceland. Graceland cost $102,000. Again, $1,000 deposit bought him Graceland on this day in 1957. He would pass away in the upstairs master bathroom back in 1977. And if you travel to Graceland today, you can take a tour. Another music legend on this day making history, Bob Dylan, releasing his self-titled debut album to mixed reviews on this day in 1962. Billboard magazine writing, Dylan, when he finds his own style, could win a big following. So Billboard not loving his first album, but saying, hey, this kid Bob, he has a future. And on this day in 2010, 15 years ago, Justin Bieber, a 16-year-old Justin Bieber, releases his debut album, My World 2.0, with the hit Baby. It debuts at number 1, setting the stage for a massive tour. And, Bieber.
The rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history, and I think he sold the rights to his music for several $100 million a couple years ago.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
See you back here tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.